Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Westgate Elementary Community Forum tonight to discuss overcrowding. I'd like to introduce to you our superintendent, Dr. Gustavo Balderas.
Thank you, Dr. Young. And before we get started, I'd like to say something in Spanish about translation. Para las personas que necesitan escuchar en español, vamos a tener una persona aquí, pero todavía no llega. Y cuando llegue, abajo de la pantalla va a tener un botón para traducir. So, cuando llegue la persona, va a estar abajo en la pantalla. I just reminded folks that our translator's not here yet, but when they do show up, there'll be a button at the bottom for them to be able to get this in Spanish. So thank you for being here this evening. And again, as Dr. Young said, tonight is a topic regarding overcrowding at our elementary schools, specifically focusing on a solution for Westgate and Sherwood. And we will have a process to gather input. And this is part of the process tonight's meeting. And we will be having an advisory group that will continue to do the work and make a recommendation to staff. But again, we value your input. I'd like to do a land acknowledgement right now, if I could. We acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes, who since time immemorial have taken care of, hunted, fished, and gathered on these lands. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. By acknowledging these homelands, we're also committing to working with tribal nations to further the education aims they have identified in our classrooms and our schools. Again, I really appreciate folks being here tonight. We have roughly 50 people. And again, look forward for your input in the conversation. So thank you. Turn it over to Harmony.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Harmony Weinberg, and I'm the Communications Manager for the Edmonds School District. I want to make sure I have an opportunity right now to introduce our panelists. So you all just saw Dr. Balderas, our superintendent. Dr. Helen Jung is our Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Schools. We have Greg Schwab, our Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Schools. Lydia Selly, our Executive Director of Business and Finance, Mary Freitas, your beloved principal of Westgate Elementary, and Darcy Becker, our Early Learning Manager. So right now, I am going to hand it over to Lydia Selly.
Good evening. Again, my name is Lydia Selly, and I wanted to provide some background for you this evening on sort of how we got to our overcrowding situation. So on the slide, you can see that Sherwood was built in 1967. Westgate was actually built earlier in 1958. They have had some modernization and additions, but not since 1989. And that we did add relocatables, which most people know as portables, to Sherwood and Westgate between 2015 and 2018. So just wanted to indicate that the city of Edmonds, since the time that those schools were built, really grew very quickly from 2000 and 1950 to currently just over 42,000. Another reason for the reason that our schools are more crowded is that up until about 13-14 school year, all districts in the state were providing half-day and some limited full-day kindergarten models. And the state had an implementation schedule so that every district in the state of Washington is now serving full-day kindergarten, which effectively doubles the number of kindergarten students that need classrooms. We also are making progress to reducing our class sizes in grades K and 3 in accordance with state guidance. And then just to reiterate that overcrowding is not just about classroom space. So even if we have sufficient classrooms, which we don't at this time, we still need additional common spaces such as the library and the classroom, the commons areas, parking, safety concerns. So we did start evaluating some long-term options about 3 years ago. We put a bond measure on the ballot last February. We started working on that bond measure about 2 years before it was put on the ballot. And one of the considerations was that district-wide, our elementary enrollment is already over capacity throughout the district. So the solution that was addressed in the bond was to move the 6th grade to a 6-8 middle school model, basically move them to the middle schools, which would alleviate some of the crowding at the elementary schools. In order to do that, we were going to build a 5th middle school at the former Alderwood Middle School site. We do have property near Linwood High School where we can build an elementary is the plan. And then after that elementary was built, we would draw new boundaries. So unfortunately, the 2020 bond measure was not successful. And so in addition to not having the funding, we have also had to turn to some short-term solutions. In addition to the bond measure not passing, we realized that it would take some time to move the 6th graders to a middle school model, and that we needed to start addressing the concerns at Sherwood and Westgate sooner than moving to a middle school model. So lots of short-term options and considered, and what I mean by short-term is usually 3 to 5 years. So at Westgate, as well as Sherwood, we have been making do with our current overcrowding for several years. On the one hand, it's not as disruptive, so nobody would have to change schools. But currently, we don't have enough classrooms, enough infrastructure that leads to negative impacts on educational programming, and it doesn't address the long-term problem. So when we look at Westgate and Sherwood, we realize that in order to really mitigate the overcrowding, we would need to move out about 80 students at a minimum per school to really provide some relief. There's also discussion around adjusting elementary boundaries. Again, since elementary enrollment is over 107% capacity district-wide, there aren't a lot of places to move elementary students to. So Edmonds Elementary does have a little bit of capacity. We figured that we could accommodate approximately 30 students from both our schools, but that's only about 15 students per school. So it really doesn't provide the relief to Westgate and Sherwood as we would hope. We could add relocatables, which we have done. We have added 6 relocatables to Sherwood as well as 5 to Westgate. The difficulty with this option is that it has a long lead time, so it wouldn't be available for 21-22 school year. Each relocatable is a classroom, and you can house approximately 24 students. And that's different than the 80 students that we need relief for. And it also doesn't increase the infrastructure. It doesn't increase the number of bathrooms or the cafeteria or the parking. Both relocatables at both sites would require permitting by the city of Edmonds. And as some people are well aware, Westgate parking and traffic are there would be very difficult to mitigate those issues in order for the city of Edmonds to allow a permit for another relocatable at Westgate. We have been approached at times by other entities, community groups, churches that say, oh, we've got a couple classrooms that we could lease to you. Usually this is a very last solution that a district would consider, and we're not considering it this time because we already have other facilities available. So one of the facilities that we have is Woodway Elementary. We could utilize Woodway Elementary as a kindergarten hub. We're anticipating that there'd be about 8 to 9 classrooms of kindergartners from both Westgate and Sherwood. We have the facility available. It's not needed for a remodel of any other school for at least 5 years. We can serve the kindergarten population very easily. We probably can't do a K-6 without capital renovation, predominantly because the infrastructure on restrooms. But for the kindergarten population, it's very, very manageable. This would cause, obviously, disruption to kindergarten families and staff. And then kindergarten students would have to go back to their home school in the first grade. The final option that we're considering is moving sixth graders at both schools to College Place Middle School. It allows some relief on overcrowding of both infrastructure and classroom space. We're thinking there would be about 4 to 5 classrooms between the two elementary schools that would go to College Place Middle. As part of the bond planning, we spent a significant amount of time reviewing the 6-8 middle school model and the instructional aspects of that. The biggest con is that our Edmonds e-learning academy is currently housed at College Place Middle School and would need to be relocated. And again, we could free up 4 or 5 classrooms between Westgate and Sherwood, but the kindergarten hub is actually more like 8, 9 classrooms. And just like a kindergarten hub, there would be disruption to 6th grade families and staff, and then 6th graders who are currently 5th graders would not get to complete their elementary experience at Westgate. Now, just to give you a sense of what a kindergarten hub is all about, I'm going to turn it over to Darcy Becker.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Darcy Becker. I'm the manager of early learning programs. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate, piggybacking on Lydia's slides. As we did the 2020 capital bond and facilities review process, we reviewed a lot of different options, but a kindergarten hub was not one of them. So there has been no advanced planning for a kindergarten hub at this point. It would mean that we would be, if we were to do a kindergarten hub or a kindergarten center, however you would like to refer to it, it would mean creating a new school culture. It wouldn't be the same as being at Sherwood or being at Westgate. It would be its own school. And this does take time, planning, and professional learning. But like would happen this time of year in a new construction school, you would be starting that planning for the fall the spring prior. So you would be selecting staff, or staff would be making choices to go to that particular site. You'd start working on your facilities plan and your schedules and all of those types of things in the spring of the year, and work through this parts of the summer. And so definitely this is something that could be in place for fall 2021. And kind of something to think about with a kindergarten hub is that when you have all of your staff at a particular site that are focused on a similar grade band or grade level, it is really the opportunity for supporting our young children would be more focused. It would give us additional space, and that increased focus, or that increased expanded team that would be serving kindergartners would have the opportunity for creating some innovative ideas. And so there's definitely some challenges and some opportunities available through a kindergarten hub. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for being here tonight. So I want to speak a little bit about the proposal to look at moving the 6th grade cohort to College Place Middle School. So as was previously mentioned, this idea of moving to a 6-8 middle school is something that we engaged in planning 2 years prior to the 2020 bond. We know that this is the direction that we want to head as a district. And so part of the initial planning for the 6-8 middle school model, we did seriously consider doing an early implementation at College Place Middle School. We do know that moving sixth graders to College Place Middle School will impact e-learning. It's a program that serves roughly 700 students in our district, and we would need to find a new location for that school as well. And we also know that any plan to move sixth graders from elementary to middle school will require continued advanced planning and professional development in order to build the program in the way that we want to build it. One of the things that this proposal to move sixth graders from Westgate and Sherwood to College Place Middle School for next year doesn't allow for is the amount of time that we would need to adequately prepare and plan to make sure that we're not just doing it to solve a space issue, but that we're doing it for solid pedagogical reasons. And I also want to say that there are really strong pedagogical reasons why the sixth graders belong in the middle school. There are a variety of reasons that we looked at through the research. And among those are things like teachers that are experts in content areas. It provides an additional year to prepare students for the transition to high school. It also allows for a third year in the middle school to allow our middle schools to build a stronger school community. We also have an opportunity to provide expanded offerings for math. We have a lot of sixth graders who are ready for accelerated math courses or who may need more intervention, so this provides an opportunity as well as access to after-school sports, clubs, and activities, and additional academic interventions. So again, the decision to move sixth grader is not solely based on solving a space issue, but there are also very strong educational reasons why we would want to take a look at moving sixth graders to a middle school.
Thank you, Greg. So now I want to talk about some next steps, because I know our families, our staff at the schools that will be impacted are curious about timelines and who makes those decisions and all of that. So I want to answer those questions here. So we are in the process of creating, like Dr. Balderas has said in the beginning of this presentation, a group of principals, teachers, parents, and central office leaders to come to consensus on our recommendations for our superintendent. Through their recommendation, he will make a sound decision. One of the important things that we have to remember is that, this advisory group will be reviewing the forms that you're going to be offered to fill out later today, and also student voice. The principals at each of the schools that will be impacted in some way have decided to create a survey to listen to what fifth graders are thinking. How do they feel about moving to a middle school model? How do kids at College Place Middle School feel about having incoming sixth graders for the first time in a long time? And so we want to hear student voice, and I want to emphasize that because that really does matter. Student voice matters in all the decision making that we do. So we're going to be collecting student voice, the voices of principals, teachers, parents, and also central office leaders to come to consensus and make a sound recommendation. I am working with Andy Knopfsiger, who is the Edmonds Education Association president for the union, and she and I are partnering together to create this group with direction also from our principals. And so if you're interested in joining this advisory committee, please reach out to Mary Freitas, your principal. And if you're a Sherwood parent and missed the presentation last night and you're here, that's awesome too. Please reach out to Christy Kessler, and they will make sure that we can do something so that your voice is heard and represented through this advisory committee. Now, this bullet here is something that I really wanted Andy and I to share together, but it does have very, very significant implications on the kind of work that central office needs to do in partnership with the association. EEA will bargain the impact of whatever decision that will be made, because it does impact working conditions like assignments, certification issues, moving, and classroom teachers, and what about specialists? SPED, titled English Language Services, ESAs like nurses, counselors, psychologists, SLPs, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, and et cetera. So we are going to make sure that there's ample time to plan, but there's a sense of urgency here because the goal is making sure that we mitigate for the overcrowding issues for next fall. Our kids deserve that. Our families deserve that. Pedagogically, it's not sound for kids to be packed in buildings where there's just not enough space to learn. The classroom is the third teacher. The physical space does have an impact on learning. And so we feel the sense of urgency, but we want to do it right at the same time. And I'd like for our stakeholders to understand that no one decision has been made. We've come to consensus on one thing, though, doing feasibility reviews and analysis, that either moving kindergarten and or moving sixth graders is probably the most sound decision that we can make. But we need to decide together with your voices what makes sense and what can we do and what is feasible or possible or doable. And so that's kind of the next steps. And you might be wondering, so how long is this going to take, Helen? Well, our goal is that we have some next steps for you by the end of February, early March. We want to make a decision. We want to, like Darcy said, we want to start planning the process as soon as possible. With whatever we decide, we want to do it right. I will be giving the school board an update on February 9th. It's just an update on how everything is progressing. So just FYI. But at the end of the day, it's really our superintendent who needs to hear all of your voices. And he's very, very, he has made it very clear that we have to be inclusive. And so this is why the whole entire process reflects inclusion of your voices. And so I highly hope that you volunteer your time, because it will be evening meetings. Volunteer your time to step up for your constituents and advise us well. Next slide. Back to you, Harmony.
All right, thank you. So right at this moment, we only have one question that I'm going to ask. So would there be a transportation plan for kindergartners from their homeschool? I'm concerned about how to get my children to 2 locations as a working parent. Lydia, you want to answer that one?
I certainly understand that. There will be transportation for either 6th grade or to the kindergarten center. Trying to evaluate what that might look like. If children are on the same bus, then it's a possibility, except for that little bit of delay in start times. So there would be a lag. So that is certainly something that will be taken under great consideration, because I know it's very important, especially with the younger ones.
Thank you, Lydia. This next question I'm going to read, and then I'll have your principal, Mary, answer it. So Westgate and Sherwood both have very strong PTA, PSO, so parent groups. And as a parent that has been active in the Westgate parents PSO group, I'm worried about how a K-Hub would build a strong PTA when the families will only be on site for 9 to 10 months.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Freitas, the principal at Westgate, and thank you for being here tonight. This is my first year at Westgate, and what I have learned is how very strong the Westgate community is. And I feel like the parents of whoever the students are, whether it's kindergarten or 6th grade, will pull together and really build that best environment for their students and for their children. I believe that what I've seen this year with PSO pulling together, they've bought supplies for our students, yearbooks for our students. They just pull together, and I feel like they would do that in the kindergarten situation as well. So I just have all faith in our kindergarten parents and our 6th grade parents also.
Thank you, Mary. So we're getting some more questions, which is great. We're here tonight to answer your questions. So please use that Q&A. This time is yours. We are here for you. So would the kindergartners be in classes by school to make a cohort for when they go to their home school? Helen, do you want to answer that?
Kindergartners being classes by school to make a cohort for when they go to their home school. Well, that's something that really does impact the number of students enrolled and the FTE of our certificated staff at the prospective building. So at this time, I would not be able to say, yes, there's going to be this cohort and you're going to get these teachers and whatnot. That's something that we would have to mitigate through EEA.
Thank you, Helen. So the next one is, by moving the kindergartners, won't there be an overcrowding issue again in first grade?
So this is Lydia Sully, and this would be not a one-year solution. It would be a multi-year solution. So as the first graders return to their homeschool, a new group of kindergartners would start at the center the following year.
Thank you, Lydia. I don't see any questions right now, but we're going to go ahead and give you a moment. I do want to ask Mary to speak a little bit to the actual space at Westgate and what moving sixth graders would free up as far as physical classroom space versus moving kindergartners. I think it paints just a physical story there. So Mary, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So either way, this is going to be very difficult. To move the kindergarten or move the sixth grade is going to be very difficult. I want to just mention that if we were at school this year, lunches would be in the classroom because we just don't have enough room. The library shares their space with the band. The parking, we've talked about drop off and pickup and how difficult that is. This year, we have 4 kindergarten classrooms that are used by kindergarten students. And we have 2 classrooms, 2 portables actually, that are used by sixth grade students. So for kindergarten, 4 classrooms would be, it's 3 classrooms and a portable would be available. And then 2 classrooms for sixth grade. Either way, this is going to be a tough situation. But again, what I have learned about Westgate is how they pull together, how they put kids first, and they think about what's best for our students, what's best for your children, for your kids. So I just appreciate that community so much, and I want to mention that again. So thank you,
Mary. Greg, so I'm going to hand over a couple sixth grade questions. I'm going to start with this one. So how can fifth graders of this school year be expected to adapt to a middle school setting when they haven't been in a classroom since they were fourth graders? The thought of my child starting middle school in the fall is terrifying.
That's a great question, and one that we absolutely have thought about in considering this possibility. We know that anytime you move sixth graders from their elementary school into a middle school, there needs to be a lot of work done to help support them from a social emotional learning standpoint as well. And in developing our plans for 6A middle school, we had a very strong component of the 6A middle school plan would be to support students' social emotional learning needs. So first, know that we understand that these students in particular are that, you're right, they haven't been in school since the second half of their fourth grade year, and now we're going to be asking them, in just a couple of months to go. Now you're going to go to a middle school. So we absolutely know that part of our planning for the middle school model would have to include making sure that those students are supported. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and here's kind of a follow-up to that. So one comment question says, it seems more logical to move sixth graders for this person's comment. So I think what they're really asking is College Place ready to take on the influx of students in the facility and staffing and how that would look? Right,
and so if we go back to when we were considering the 6A middle school advanced planning model at College Place Middle School back when it was part of the bond, part of the reason for doing that was because College Place Middle School is smaller. It's one of our smallest. It is our smallest middle school, and they had the space and capacity to be able to take the additional sixth graders coming. And so again, I want to be really clear that we're doing the 6A middle school partly to solve a space issue, but we also are doing it because we think it's the right thing to do from an educational standpoint. That moving sixth graders into a middle school does support their educational needs as well. And that really is one of the primary drivers for making this decision. But we also know that, again, we just need to make sure that they're very well supported. And there's also some staffing implications as well. As, we need to work with our association and our human resources department to identify the teachers that would move with them too, because certifications are different and there's there's a need to make sure that the teachers that are teaching in a middle school have the right certification. And so that's work that we have to do as well.
Thanks, Greg. And Lydia, this one I think is for you. Can you go back to the question about whether there would be overcrowding ongoing because there would be more first grade classrooms?
So if kindergartners attended the center, they would return to either Westgate or Sherwood. So I did mention that there's 8 to 9 classrooms of kindergartners that would be expected, but that's between the two schools. So, and then those kindergarten center students would return to their either Westgate or Sherwood in first grade, and the next group of kindergartners would go to the kindergarten center. So you're always removing that one grade from the total population.
Thanks, Lydia. Why isn't moving 6th grade to the old Woodway Elementary being considered? Lydia?
So 2 reasons. 5 classrooms. When you're designing a center, 5 classrooms, you can't make the educational experience quite as robust as you can with 8 or 9 classrooms. So within design, the biggest challenge is the bathrooms are small. And I know that sounds like a funny problem, but the reality is that is one thing that we would renovate if we had the funds, was to increase the size of the bathrooms. And they're fantastic for small people, not as good for 12 and 13-year-olds.
Thank you. So if the 6th graders were to stay at Westgate, Mary, I'm going to have you answer this one. Wouldn't you still have the same problem with band being in the library?
Well, I would hope that by having 4 extra classrooms, we might be able to find another space for band. We are just sharing all of our different spaces right now.
Thanks, Mary. How will you weigh the cost to move? How will you weigh the cost to moving school for a 1st grader versus a 6th grader? We have a child. Sorry, there's a loud boom outside of my house. We have a child going into kindergarten next year and then 2 other elementary age children. We are concerned about coordinating transportation, extracurricular activities, and childcare. Helen, you want to take this one?
I think it's a hard thing to do a side-by-side, honestly, because you can ask a kindergarten parent and, transportation is hard, extracurricular activity is hard, childcare is hard. And I agree with them. It is hard. This is a very, very hard decision for families and also our staff. I just don't want to leave out our teachers. It's hard for them to leave a school community, whether they're 6th grade teachers or whether they're kindergarten teachers. You've been a part of a family, and it's the thought of not being there is a hard transition for everybody. At the same time, if you ask a 6th grade family, what about extracurricular activities? And in the same question, I think you're going to get the same kind of response. And so for me to say, hey, I'm going to try to tell you which is harder, is because that's emotional costs, I think. There's financial costs, but then there's also an emotional cost that I also do recognize. And so I don't think I can say one is actually easier than the other. With that said, we do have to understand that the goal is next fall. And that's something that we're committed to, because there is a sense of urgency around mitigating for overcrowding. Our kids deserve it. Our staff deserve it. When you're having band in a library, when you're having, like, for example, at Sherwood too, currently they have 3 6th grade classrooms, but 2 physical spaces are being shared for those 3 cohorts of 6th graders. It's not okay. And we can't have them wait any longer. And so our goal is to mitigate for these issues by next fall. And so what can we do by next fall? What is feasible? Meaning all the hardships aside, because I can talk to a kindergarten family and my heart breaks for them. I can talk to a 6th grade family, a 5th grader, like a parent said today, they've missed a lot of school because of the pandemic. And now they're just going to skip over to middle school. Like, they haven't even experienced fifth grade fully as a fifth grader. And so they have not had a chance to transition with their cohort. So that's also heartbreaking. Same time, we've got to focus on what is doable for fall. Whether we consider all the challenges or not, we've got to get really focused on what's doable. And this is why I would really like to turn around making sure that our advisory group has a recommendation that's solid. That's not based on our feelings, even though our feelings do matter. And I totally get that also as a parent. I do have a fifth grader right now, and I was just thinking and sitting, and that question really resonated with me. This could be my daughter, who has been at home for a very long time, and now I'm going to ask them to, like, you're in middle school, and they've not expected that. So I get it. So I guess long answer to tie that up in a bow a little bit. We've got to focus on what we can do to mitigate for the space. And think outside the box and be innovative. I hope I answered your question.
I think you did. So next question, can you share some financial pros, cons? So I'll have Lydia talk about this, but the person's asking that the kindergarten site would likely need an office, principal, chef, janitors, and recess teachers, plus a librarian, but those roles are already at the middle school.
So certainly, so if it was a kindergarten center, we would have to determine what kind of staffing for basically a very small elementary school. So certainly office staff, administrative support, custodial, librarian, those kinds of positions that are, at the building, whereas the teachers follow the children. So there would be an added cost. At the same time, if sixth graders were moved to College Place Middle, we would possibly incur additional costs for the e-learning program to move to another location. So that could possibly be offset. So yes, a kindergarten center requires some of those positions that are already currently filled at their home school.
Thank you, Lydia. If kindergarten is moved to Woodway, would there be, oh, we already answered that one. Sorry. There was two similar. So this person's asking, wouldn't it be easier for high school transition if there was a 3-year middle school experience, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the compelling reasons why we look at a 6-8 middle school model is it provides that additional year of getting our students more of a high school-like experience where they have an opportunity to take classes from a few different teachers. While they would not necessarily do the same schedule as a 7th or an 8th grader, they might do some of that. So they might have a teacher for math or for English and social studies, for example, or math and science, and then take an elective class. So they wouldn't have 6 classes, but they would start to get the experience of what it's like to be in a school where you're changing classes and you have to manage multiple classes and multiple teachers, which I think would help prepare them to be ready for high school in that 9th grade year.
Thanks, Greg. So it looks like that might be it for questions. So I think right now I will toss it over to Helen.
Thank you, Harmony. I'd like to just reiterate in summary that this is a very personal decision, and I know that family, staff, and all of our stakeholders are heavily impacted. And I really hope that we can come to consensus to mitigate for these issues, because space is something that does impact teaching and learning every single day. But I do see a question up there, and I do want you to get to it because we do have time, Harmony.
Yes. So what is the science on the effects on kinder students to transition twice, once into kindergarten and again to first? Darcy, did you want to take that one, or Helen?
Sure, I can take that. I think all of our kinders, they all transition into kindergarten every year. So it is their first foray into the big school, and it's an exciting time for young children to go to school, and they've been waiting to go to school there are some fears and trepidations, and it is a transition for sure, which is why we do a lot of transition activities in throughout the spring and jumpstart and those types of things to get the students ready for that big transition to the big school. So what would be really important? The science tells us that anytime children are going to be transitioning between levels or transitioning from one place to the next, the important thing is not to avoid the transition, but to support the transition. And so the more we can provide opportunities for the children to have those experiences that build that sense of confidence, you know, that sense that they know where they're going, they know what the school looks like, they know how things work. So that would be greatly mitigated by having kind of those ongoing, or especially in the spring of the year, those kinds of activities where they are connecting with the children who are currently first graders at either Westgate or Sherwood, and doing some virtual field trips or doing some actual field trips to where they're going to be going. So there are ways to make those transitions really to help children reduce anxiety around transitions. And so that's what I would say is the science is really pretty clear on the support that you need to put in place to prepare kids for those transitions. So that would be a big planning piece at a kindergarten center or kindergarten hub for that.
Thank you, Darcy. When does Jumpstart this year? Is it going to happen this year?
Well, that's a great question. That has not been decided yet. We have not. I also, as part of my role, work with a K advisory team, which includes kindergarten teachers from across the district, every building. And so that is a agenda item on our K advisory team agenda for later on the month of January. So we have several different options. We have several different ways, and we try to consider, just like we do in these situations, we try to consider a range of options and then determine what's really in the best interest and what is most supportive of students and families. So we will have more information about that to come.
Thank you. I think that we have a couple of kinder questions or Jumpstart questions. So I thank you for answering that. One of the questions is, how will the final decision be made? And I know we mentioned that at the beginning, but Helen, I think it's worth reiterating, and then I'll get to this next question.
Sure. We are putting together an advisory committee comprised of principals, teachers, parents, and also central office leaders, and also gathering student voice. And we're going to be reviewing all of the input through the form that we're going to be sharing. The principals will be sharing a form later tonight that you will be receiving. We're going to be reviewing the information and the data, coming up with themes, concerns. It's really all about hopes, fears, and your wonders. And looking at that and looking at the data that we do have, feasibility data of timelines, and what does it really take for either of these groups to move, and what are the pedagogical impacts of each, and then make a recommendation for our superintendent and our district staff, and collectively we'll make a decision and make an announcement.
Thanks, Helen. I do want to get back to you, Darcy. There's a couple more Jumpstart questions. So I think for the current first graders who have missed, is there a plan to do Jumpstart for first graders who have missed it this year going into kindergarten? And then does that mean there would be a Jumpstart to help the kinder kids from a possible hub get ready for first grade so that when they transition into their homeschool? So if you could touch on those, Darcy, that'd be great.
Right. Because we have not planned any of this yet, so these are still to be determined kinds of things. One of the, or from a kindergarten hub to first grade, that's kind of is not decisions that have been made at all. So we will be working through that process. As for our current kinders, if there would be a jump start for them going into first grade, part of that will depend upon the stage 2 reentry plan that we that we still have to work on and design for reentry in this current year. So for this current year, if our kindergartners come back in the spring, later on in the spring, or sometime this current year, then they would have some time at the school and wouldn't necessarily need a jumpstart program for first grade. But I don't think anything is particularly off the table either at this point. So part of it would be what is needed. What do we feel is really needed? And a lot of that has to do with input from principals around what they feel is most supportive of the social and emotional needs of their kids coming back in to an in-person model.
Thank you, Darcy. If there ends up being a kindergarten hub, would the plan be to keep that going indefinitely until the sixth graders can move out into the middle school? At that time, it would then be a K-5 and 6-8 model. I know there is a plan for a levy in April, but would that passing get the ball rolling on the K-8, 6-8 model? Would these kinders potentially be at a kindergarten hub and then at a 6-8 middle school, therefore only being at elementary school 1st through 5th grade? Lydia, do you want to take a?
That's a great question, and I'm delighted that you're reading the Edmonds newsletter about our April levy. So the April levy is sort of a transition levy. It's to complete some projects, alleviate some of our crowding, and some repair and maintenance items. The goal ultimately is to pass a bond in the future in order to build that 5th middle school in order to make the 6-8 model work. So currently our demographer sees that both the Westgate and Sherwood communities are continuing to grow in enrollment. So this could certainly be a solution until we're ready for that middle school model. As far as would it be K and then 1 through 5, probably less likely at that time. Although there is a possibility we are looking at more expansion of preschool programs. So if the kindergarten center is successful and we go to a middle school model, it may be a good segue into more early learning programs.
Thank you, Lydia. As far as the timeline for Jumpstart, I know, Darcy, that we'll have more information out to families hopefully soon, but is there a typical time just for possibly new families to our system of when we do Jumpstart?
Well, we have done Jumpstart historically. We have done Jumpstart 2 weeks before the actual first day of school. So if the day, like for this school year, the first day of school was September 9th, I believe. And so the day of Jumpstart, the start of Jumpstart was the last full week in August, but it isn't always the last full week in August because that's often when our staff is coming back. So it's hard for me to just give you like the 3rd week of August or the 4th week of August because it depends on how the calendar falls. So it's typically the week before staff come back and report back for their contracts, which isn't necessarily helpful for parents. But
well, I think too, just saying, August, right? Typically August, so that's at least helpful in planning. But understanding that where we're at with COVID and the pandemic and planning, it is tricky. But we are mindful of families wanting to plan. I think many of us are planners, so we totally understand that question, and we will continue to communicate as clearly and as quickly as we can. So I think that we're going to wrap up questions for the night. Helen, I know you kind of started to close earlier. I'm going to let you close and then hand it over to Dr. Balteras for some closing remarks, and then we'll let our attendees enjoy the rest of their evening.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us, and I really appreciate all of your questions and concerns and your hopes and fears and wonders, really. And if you can really fill out that form so that our advisory group can review it, I would really greatly appreciate it. It only takes a few minutes to fill out, so please wait for that from your principal. And I'd like to hand it over to our superintendent, Dr. Balderas.
So thank you again for the conversations and all the questions and the answers. And I really do want to thank the panel for being on tonight. And we had a panel again last night. And again, as Dr. Young has stated, this is going to be an ongoing discussion. And as we seek a resolution that's the best resolution for all our kids. And again, just thank you for being here tonight and more information to come. So thank you.